L'Enfant's Avengers, assemble! Welcome to American Esoterica. If history class gives you the 4 episodes on a single topic, this is the, 4th episode. The essential stuff in between. The personalities, events, and other ephemera that shape our history and culture. I'm Brian Powers. Just where is our national capital a century after becoming the permanent seat of government? A disgusting cowtown. An embarrassing place to bring foreign dignitaries for sure, especially those used to the crown jewels of European capitals. Washington, D.C. is a filthy, muddy swamp with unpaved roads, terrible sewers, and a twisted cesspool of ragged buildings right at the heart of the city. Herds of cattle often roamed freely on the mall. I wasn't kidding when I said cowtown. In 1900, to mark the occasion of the centenary of the city's status, big public forums and speeches all outlined in great detail just how much D.C. sucked. Well, what's to be done? Are we gonna just sit there and let our national capital be gross? Heck no! We're Americans after all. We're gonna make a big move. We're gonna form a commission. The brains of the operation, the man with the plan, the head cheese, the Hannibal in this A-team is Senator James McMillan, and he really does love it when a plan comes together. He introduces a joint resolution in 1900 to form a commission for the purposes of exploring a comprehensive park system in the capital, and it immediately gets shot down by the Speaker of the House, who does not want to spend public money on aesthetic improvements. Senator McMillan deftly sidesteps that idiot, and in early 1901, he manages to get authority to put together a dream team of experts, Ocean's 11 style. Let's do this! Welcome to the very first National Mall Revitalization Invitational on BSBN. I'm Brian Powers, and with me as always is commentator Brian Powers. Good to have you, Brian. It's great to be here, Brian. All right, well, let's talk about the team that Senator McMillan has put together. Out of the gate, he's gonna need an architect, and he manages to get 2 of the finest. That's right, Brian. Daniel Burnham's the cream of the crop. Just 8 years off the success of his crowning achievement, the White City in Chicago for the 1893 World's Fair. You can try, but you just ain't gonna get any better than that. Right you are, Brian. But hold on. Charles McKim brings a solid record as well, having created such iconic structures as the Boston Public Library and, later on, the Smithsonian Museum of Natural History. He also worked with Burnham on the 1893 World's Fair. That's a good point, Brian. In fact, McMillan's dream team is pretty much the same team Burnham put together for that event, which pretty much everybody worldwide celebrated as a genuine achievement. That's true, Brian. Beyond the structural architects, you've got Frederick Law Olmsted Jr., the world's most famous urban landscape artist and designer of New York's Central Park. I'll tell you what, man, that guy just knows urban green spaces, because he did them up from New York to Louisville. You can't hardly set foot east of the Mississippi without being in one of his parks. Rounding out the lineup in the big names department is sculptor Augustus St. Gaudens, most famous for his sculpture of Abraham Lincoln in Lincoln Park in Chicago, and for his work on the statuary in the 1893 World's Fair. That's just a little peek of his work throughout, though. If you want to bring some art to the proceedings, Augustus is your guy. Very true, Brian. We're going to take a break, but stay with us here as we witness the first National Mall Revitalization Invitational, right here on BSBN. With this team in hand, the other thing McMillan needs is a philosophical touchstone for the work to be done. Luckily, this has been provided just a year or so earlier. See, Pierre L'Enfant famously made few copies of his plans, one of the reasons that angered his successor, Andrew Ellicott, and ultimately led to his dismissal. But he did make a few copies for those he deemed important enough, like George Washington. L'Enfant's pig-headedness almost made him a footnote in the history of the city that he had largely designed. But in 1899, a civil engineer by the name of John Stuart wrote a paper explaining that, in 1791, L'Enfant had sent George Washington a map, which the latter forwarded with handwritten instructions by Thomas Jefferson to the commissioners in 1796, and that he, John Stuart, had stumbled across this map still in the commissioner's office in 1873. It was still there. What ensued was a decades-long debate over at least 2 different maps and who made them, but the upshot is that the McMillan Commission had the recently unearthed original L'Enfant plan from which to work. And like a mighty team of superheroes, work they did. It's important to note that one thing all the members of the team had in common was support of the City Beautiful movement, which developed a set of principles for the improvement of urban areas through everything from more playgrounds to civic buildings in the classical style, reflective of the French Beaux-Arts school of thought, which used multiple forms of the visual arts in architecture. In 1901, the Commission prepped the Macmillan Plan, a comprehensive master plan for Washington, D.C. that provided a roadmap for the city and a restoration of L'Enfant's vision. Notably, it wasn't a law or regulation, and it didn't ask to spend any money. The team not only worked tirelessly on the plan, they toured the great cities of Europe for inspiration, particularly the gardens at Versailles that had inspired L'Enfant. The plan basically cleaned up most of the downtown area and established a defined national mall with prescribed setbacks to preserve green space. It relied heavily on L'Enfant's original plan to create large open gathering spaces and grand lawns. It set design standards for buildings in the area. It created a system of parks with an eye to protecting natural beauty and scenic views. It proposed the addition of new monuments to Presidents Lincoln and Grant. It even set up a plan for improving the city water supply. The Macmillan Commission basically just set out a plan for how to get D.C. back on the rails, largely by getting rid of the rails. It called for the railroad tracks to be routed away from the mall. Daniel Burnham's motto was, "Make no little plans," and the Commission stayed true to that motto. The plan was presented to the public for the first time in 1902, and it had a profound effect on D.C. almost immediately. It was largely accepted as a comprehensive plan for the city moving forward. Its first victory came when the railroad platform and tracks across the mall area were dismantled and moved to newly constructed Union Station, designed by, when you know it, Daniel Burnham's people. In 1910, under a new law granting him the authority, President Taft created the Commission of Fine Arts to act in an advisory role on all new development in the downtown area. It didn't have actual veto power, but it didn't need it. Its influence was strong enough to enact its vision. It wouldn't surprise you to learn that its vision was the Macmillan Plan, considering that two of the first appointed members of the CFA were Daniel Burnham and Frederick Law Olmsted Jr. The final pieces of the puzzle didn't really start coming together until the 1920s, with the establishment of the National Capital Park and Planning Commission. That group took upon itself the task of transforming the downtown area into the glorious plan drawn up by the Macmillan Commission, which they did in earnest in the 1930s. You wouldn't be shocked to learn that Frederick Law Olmsted Jr. was an original member of that group as well. All in all, Pierre L'Enfant's plan for the capital city largely came into being, although it took over 130 years for it to happen. The Washington, D.C. as you know it today, one glorious national mall bounded by gardens and classical buildings, is basically less than 100 years old. The parts of it where the Lincoln, Jefferson, MLK, and FDR memorials sit today literally did not exist in 1870, when the unfinished Washington Monument stood sentinel over the waterfront of the Potomac. It may have taken some time to get there, but the plan for a glorious gem of a national capital to rival the major cities of Europe eventually did come together. Now, if we could just do something about all the politicians. This has been American Esoterica. All sounds are made by me, Brian Powers. Did I get it wrong? Did I get it right? Just want to talk about not talking about anything? Drop me a note. The address is yell@AmericanEsoterica.com. More information on this show and its episodes can be found at AmericanEsoterica.com. Thank you for listening, and God bless America.